Welcome back. I'm here with Dr. John Berardi, good friend of mine. Largely retired dad, as you can see, soccer dad by his shirt, but
I'm
uh,
representing my new interests.
representing your new interest. Sold 80% of your company with you and your partner at a value close to 200 million, according to your website. I went on the Wayback Machine, JB.
Oh, nice. I took my kids there the other day, actually. It's funny you mentioned that because I was teaching them how to look at old internet things. So what did you
Yeah,
what did you creep, you strange creeper?
I looked up your website
Yeah.
from 2002,
Nice.
the old
JohnBerardi.com.
johnberardi.com. And I looked a number of times all throughout the years at how your website had evolved. And it was super interesting to see the evolution at the
Fun.
beginning. Well, and at the beginning, it was all about, it was Science Link, right, was the
Hmm.
name of it. And you were writing articles about
Yeah.
health and fitness. I mean, what did you know? What did you not know back then?
Right. Do you mean about
What were you doing? Why
the
were you doing
world,
it?
about the internet, about
Why were you writing articles on the internet in 2002? Nobody was writing articles on the internet in 2002.
Yeah, it was no fault of my own. Yeah, no, I was so yeah, I'm trying to figure out. This was around the time I met Phil. So Phil Caravaggio is my business partner, who you know. Some of you listening may not know, but Phil was a systems design engineering student at Waterloo, which is a well-known uh, technical university in Canada. It's kind of like the MIT, so
Right.
for of Canada. So for people
It's
who
what
are really
BlackBerry came out of and stuff. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. For people who are like super smart in engineering and certain science fields and stuff, they go to University of Waterloo as people will go to MIT.
Right.
And Phil just happened to have a side interest in health and fitness. We met at a big conference in Toronto called
Okay.
Swiss many years ago.
I didn't know you met at Swiss. Okay.
Yeah. So Phil had intended on being there. He sent me a email prior to that, and Phil's just a super interesting guy, and he's well spoken. So I used to get a lot of emails back then,
Right.
but his stood out, and he said I'll be at this event, and I was in London, which is the
How did he
university.
know to send you an email? Were you already writing articles at this point?
Yeah, I was online. This was I think I wrote my first article online in like 1998.
Got it. Okay.
And that was for a website called Virtual Muscle. So at the time, T Nation, which is
Yeah.
testosterone.net at the time, they were using .net appendixes, um, was the big website for people into strength training and hormonal manipulation and bodybuilding and even sport, elite level sport. And so Virtual Muscle started to maybe compete with testosterone.net. And I knew the guys at Virtual Muscle. I didn't know the testosterone guys. So I put a couple articles there in like 98. And then I think
Yeah.
in 99, I put a couple on testosterone.net. And so people had already known of my work probably for 2 3 years, who were like insiders following the
Sure.
space. I certainly didn't have a big reputation, but by that point, but people who followed it kind of knew. And like as you are and have been, like I like writing a lot, and I was prolific. I wrote and published as often as I could to get not only the reps in, but each time I did that work, it was usually like reviewing something I was learning. So it was an
Yeah.
opportunity to teach. Also, you know, back then you didn't have access like you do now to knowledge and information. I mean, I
Right.
had to like learn the latest science of nutrition and supplementation. You had to go to the basement of your university library. So you need to be a university student, right? You need to know where the dusty old stacks were, and you had to go down into the bowels of the
Yeah.
building and just sit there looking through literally printed research journals
Yeah.
because there was no online access. And um, PubMed was around, so you could look for what interesting stuff, what like abstracts and papers were published. But most times I you found things like a treasure hunter
Yeah.
searching for buried treasure. You'd literally open up the Journal of Applied Physiology and read the table of contents and be like, what studies were published over the last 3 6 months that could be perverted into muscle building or health improvements or sports improvements. Um, so this is what I was up to. And so Phil drops me a line, says, "Hey, I'm going to be at Swiss. I'd love to come out and meet you. I'm a big fan of your work, whatever. Here's what I do, etc., etc." We met, we hit it off, we grabbed a bite to eat. Turns out one of his good friends lived in London, which is where I was studying at the time. So he's like, "Hey, I come down all the time. We should meet up." He came to the lab, he checked out what I was doing, and then he said, "Hey, listen, the stuff that you're doing publishing online is pretty interesting, but I really think the wave of the future will be personal websites for
Yeah.
experts like you.
Crazy.
So we should make a website for you."
Hey
And I
man,
was like,
I have this crazy idea.
yeah, that's right. That's exactly right.
This is insane. Okay.
Yeah.
A
And, I'm
website.
that's right. And the visionary that I am was like, that'll never work.
Yeah, of course.
Well, you have to, the thing to remember I'm not that much of a dummy, but everyone was on dial up. I was on dial up at the time. So to access testosterone.net, you would have to pull up this URL and you would wait and wait
Yeah.
and wait. Page load times were very slow. So the title of the article would come up after like 5 minutes of waiting. And then you'd be like, okay, cool. I hope it's a good one because I'm going to sit here and wait for it. And then I would read a book while I was waiting for the internet to load up on my screen. So you're like, who's going to, I get that people might wait for a site like testosterone.net, but who's going to wait for my website to load to read my articles? I don't know, man. And he's like, "Oh no, listen, within the next," and he had stats, within the next couple of years, this number of people are going to be on high-speed internet, and you'll just be one of the first. You'll be one of the first experts with their own website. I mean, the person who came, and so he's like a generation before me, but was super well known in the field, was Charles Poliquin, and he's from Canada. And there were we had met a few times, and he had started publishing on testosterone.net maybe like a year or two before me, but he didn't even have a website at the time. And he was like, so I was part of the very first guard, if you will, of people who were, and maybe one of the first in the field to have a website. And okay, so we have a website. What do you do on the website now?
Right.
Well, you publish things for free. And then maybe you ask for an email address to build up a mailing list, and then you sell things. So we didn't get to the selling things for a couple of years, but we asked for people's email address. We send extra special content to them. We publish 1-2 articles a week, and that's how we're doing it for the first 2 years.
It's what I love so much about your story is how you were. I don't know if you'd ever define yourself for this term, but to me, it comes down a lot to optimistic ignorance. Like, you didn't quite know where this thing was going. It was just interesting to you when you were pursuing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it doesn't
absolutely.
take, like, I guess this is the point that I keep reminding myself and harping on and get reminded of all the time, is that it really doesn't take a lot of lucky breaks.
Mm-hmm.
And for most people in their life, you only need one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And you characterize it really well. And in fact, like, this wasn't just characterizing my beginnings. It was literally everything up until we sold the company. We had built a company around essentially who I was and what I was interested in and what I wanted to do. And then as I evolved, because our what we were doing lasted 20 years. As I grew up, my interests changed, my orientation to the world changed, etc. The audience just came for a ride with us, and we picked up new people along the way. So it was actually quite strange to me when in 2016, 2017, big, private equity companies were coming in and saying, "We love what you're doing. We want to buy it and own it."
Right.
And I was like, "Oh, wait a second. This is just this weird company." And I know, I'm not naive. Like, I know we have good revenue, and I know, we're making an impact in the industry, but this is just this weird company built around the stuff I wanted to do. And importantly, what I didn't want to do,
Well, that's almost more important, isn't it? You stuck in your lane very well for all those years.
Mm-hmm.
You really, I mean, you followed your own interests, but you stuck in your lane. You did what you did, and you kept doing what you did better and better and better and better. For the longest time, you guys didn't do Instagram. Like you were,
Mm-hmm.
Precision Nutrition was very late to Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
The same with paid advertising.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you did content and email marketing
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
launches.
Yeah. And the other part, even very like specific to me, was while most people were drumming up business by traveling and giving live seminars and doing events and things like that,
Yeah.
I just knew that I didn't have that in me. I didn't like traveling that much. Um, I didn't like being away from home. I'm largely an introvert. So all of that just seemed off-putting. I was like, if that's what it's going to take to be successful, I'm not going to do it. I
Right.
know myself well enough that I'm simply not going to do that. But thankfully, I was born at the exact right moment within plus or minus 2 years where I didn't have to, right? I could sit in a setting just like this, where at my cottage right now, I could just make a have a single room with a microphone and a camera, which
Right.
is what we did all along. I mean, in the early days, I set up a teleprompter in my basement. I set up a nice little set with a fake plant and a table to
Yep.
lean on. I kept my right hand under the camera view because that's how
Yep.
I ran the teleprompter,
Yep.
and I would just
With
make
a with a
content.
with a phone. Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
I've done
and
that.
then I'm like, oh, great. And then once I'm done my lecture, I can go back upstairs, be with my wife, be with my family, go to the
Right.
gym, sit quietly in nature, whatever introverts do, read a book, and
Shake in a corner. Yeah, I
that's
feel
right,
you. Yeah.
and shake in a corner, and that's and then I could have a whole business doing this, and so what did I do that? Thankfully, it was time where you could stream those in high speed internet.
Right.
um, and what did I not do? Travel around, doing seminars, getting on airplanes, staying in hotels. Now, I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm just saying that the one that worked for me
Yeah.
as a person happened to also be the one that was integral to growing our business.
I think that's such a key point is that there's no one way to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about this a lot in the book, in the Obvious Choice book, is there might be a capital B best way to do
Mm-hmm.
something. Reels on TikTok might be the best way to get eyeballs and views today. Like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, maybe they are, maybe they're not, right?
Yeah.
There might be a capital B best way, but even if there is, you won't even recognize it when you're doing it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of irrelevant. But also, there's a lot of lowercase ge good enough ways that work too.
Totally.
And my opinion is that a good enough way that you're able to do consistently and get consistently good at and better and better and better over time
Mm-hmm.
so that the compounding effects can begin to take over
Yep.
because you've gotten so good and built a reputation. You find your people, right?
Yeah.
Like people who like somebody who's super entertaining and funny and jumping on videos and stuff like that is not gonna follow me.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who likes to perhaps think a little bit deeper, somebody who likes to read, like they're my people. And you find your people when you do your thing
Yeah.
consistently for a long enough time. And the people who aren't your people don't come to you,
Yeah, that's
which
right.
is also fine.
Yeah, and I would add this one layer to what you're saying, and I know you've talked about this before, so I know it's not new to
Do
you,
it.
but I think it's important to the audience. Is there might be a best way within each game that you can decide to play, right? So if you decide to
Okay.
play social media as one of your lead generation strategies, then there are some bad ways to do social media, and there are some better ways, and whatever. I don't even know the right words for it because I don't do it. But my kids always make fun of me when I'm like, "Hey, are you snapping with your friends?" They're like, "Oh, we don't call it snapping." I don't know the words, kids. But
Oh God, I
nevertheless,
can't. Calvin's starting. My oldest, who you know, but
yeah.
Calvin's starting to use some of those words, and the amount
Mm-hmm.
of times now I have to ask him what something means.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah. I'm just like trying to be like, oh, what are you doing? Are you snap chatting with your friends? What do you call that?
Yeah,
Snapping? Oh God, Dad, you're the worst. But nevertheless, within each game, there may be a best way to play it,
yeah,
right? But you get to choose the game, right?
yeah.
So I think that's the most important part. To build your business, you have to choose which games you're going to play.
And you
And then,
can choose your game.
yes,
You are
you can choose your game.
allowed to choose your game.
Yep.
Yeah,
And then once you choose it, right, and presumably you're going to choose it based on some criteria like, does this fit with my own values? Does this fit with my own personality? Does this fit with how I want to spend my time and what my skills
right.
are? Um, Once you choose your game, then it's your job to figure out how to play it the best way, right? How
Right.
how do you market within this channel? How do you create content within this type of content creation to get the most eyeballs, to be the most trustworthy, to be the most compelling? I was talking with someone the other day about this, and eyeballs isn't. It feels like the metric most people are chasing
Right.
nowadays, but and it's important because if no one's looking at it, then you don't have any impact, you don't make any money, etc. But there's this other part where like you also have to be trustworthy,
Yep.
likable, believable, so enough people can see you and then they can see those things that they need to see to want to take the next steps in your customer
Right.
journey, if you want to call it that. So again, yeah, I think the important part, and this just maps to my experience really, really well, but I don't think this is like an n equals one. This thing worked for me and it's not going to work for anyone else. The people, I even had this moment the last time I was at a seminar many moons ago, John. um, I remember sitting in the audience while litany of presenters went up, all great at what they do, um, and they were all very different. And
Yeah.
I remember looking around the room and I just felt this energy. And I don't know that I captured it accurately, but the energy was there's a group of young people sitting in the crowd trying to figure out which person they want to copy on the
Huh.
stage. Like which person they want to be most like in their business.
Right.
And I thought, man, they don't, this is the wrong approach.
So
You
what?
know,
So what should they? What should call him? Call him Timmy Rothschild. What should Timmy Rothschild, the ideal audience member,
yeah.
have done?
Yeah. I mean, Timmy needs to figure out like what is the unique thing that Timmy can bring to the stage when it's his turn, right? Because
Yeah.
everyone up there was doing something differently and they had their own style and their own personality, and that's why they were there, right? Like lots of people can sell this widget or that widget. Lots of
Right.
people can make content on the current social media platform of the day. Um, what made that person be the one who was invited to speak? It's something was
Interesting.
unique and different and trustworthy and believable about them, right? So Timmy needs to figure out what's unique and noteworthy and special and excellent and trustworthy about him, you know? And then he comes to the stage one day and he is the unique thing up there, right?
Right.
There's already one of each of those. There's already one of
Yeah.
me and one of you. And so trying to be a version of you or me is a problem. Like I'm always going to be better at it, dude, because it's who I am all the way through. And I have a lot more experience than you do at being me. You know what I mean? So you
Yeah.
can't compete with this. The only thing you can do is carve out your own, we'll call it like a micro niche. You know what I mean? Which
Yeah.
is the words you use, the way you say things, the way, and now the stage is just an example. You don't have to be on stage, right? You could be doing it by writing, by making videos, by doing audio, whatever medium you choose, right?
Right.
It's just got to be the one that you can own and be special in.
I mean, you could do it networking with local businesses and putting on charity events locally. Like
Mm-hmm.
you could do it any which way. I think I like what you're talking about because it seems like it works backwards from who you really are and what makes you special and unique. There's something really, really cool about this world, the call it the business world that we're in today, which
Mm-hmm.
is you really can carve out your own path, can't you?
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah, totally.
really can.
Mm-hmm.
But that brings a whole series of yes, new opportunities, but also requirements and skill sets.
Mm-hmm.
You have to filter good information for somebody else
Mm-hmm.
from good information for you. There's a lot of arguments online of between two people who are just playing different games.
Yep.
Like you just have different time horizons, goals,
Mm-hmm.
and so neither one of you is right, neither one of you is wrong. You're talking about two entirely different things, which is why you're arguing.
Yeah.
And I think your example on stage, actually, where I thought you were going to go with that was there are all these speakers on stage who were all telling you, their steps to success or their
Mm.
funnels or the things that they're doing, and they either contradict each other, which sometimes
Mm-hmm.
happens when you see. So you're like, so what am I supposed to do? Like this person
Yeah.
said this thing, and that person said the exact opposite, and they said not to do this
Mm-hmm.
thing. But also, what happens is like, if I've got to do all, this is what I think sometimes. I'm like, if I've got to do all this just to make a living,
Mm-hmm.
count me out.
Mm-hmm.
But other people are like, hustle, let's do it. I'm in.
Yeah.
I don't think either of us are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But so how do you figure this out?
Mm-hmm.
Because you do. So let me lead into this a little bit better. A number of years back, this is many years ago now, I sent you an email, I think it was, and I said, dude, what the heck's going on? According to my email management software, you are my most engaged email subscriber. I
Mm-hmm.
had like 120,000 people on my list. And like,
Mm-hmm.
you were my most engaged email subscriber. Like, why? Like, what the hell is going on? And you told me that you choose one person, I think it was each year,
Mm-hmm.
each time frame, and basically just follow them to see what they're doing and how do you, so first of all, talk to me about that because I think that that's a brilliant way to learn
Mm-hmm.
and be focused in your learning. But then I also want to know how you chose the people that you were choosing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. It's a great question. Thanks for asking it. Yeah, I categorize this in my book. For those curious, I wrote this book, Changemaker. Um,
Great book, terrible forward.
yeah, written by some knucklehead, Jonathan Goodman. And the the formula for me is like, what does education look like over the years? Right?
Yeah,
Like in the beginning, we know what education looks like. You take some certifications and you go to some courses and seminars and whatever, learn from university. Whatever path you choose, there's a person up front speaking, telling you facts that are written in a book somewhere, and you go through that. And I have no judgment on that. I spent many years learning in that way, and it was necessary for me. Um, and then at a certain point, though, for me anyway, you get in your career and you're like um, people call this diminishing returns, right? It's like
yeah,
for each hour I spend trying to learn that way, it doesn't feel like I'm learning a proportional amount that'll help me make the next moves in my career. And I noticed that I got a like multi-tiered education when I started following experts, masters of their own craft, right?
yeah.
And and I mean, what did I get out of it, right? So the example of following you, I was like, okay, here's what I find interesting. This is like my thought process when I chose you to follow about John Goodman and what he's up to. Number one, it feels like we share the same foundational principles of marketing. We like understand the same things. Our values
Yeah.
probably have a good amount of overlap. So I don't feel like anything he's doing is like weird or creepy or wouldn't I wouldn't simply wouldn't do. You know what I mean? So there was that. So I'm like, there's like a
Largely
values
founded in
alignment.
psychology and human
Exactly.
behavior,
Yes.
and yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I'm like, I can tell what he's reading by
yeah.
how he's
I
communicating.
love that. I was like, sometimes I read stuff by people, and I'm just like, oh, you just read that book, did
Yeah,
you?
exactly. That's right. Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, good. There's that. The
Right.
second part is, you know, I always find it interesting because Jonathan Goodman is teaching people how to market in some of
Right.
his materials, but I don't care what he says about how I should market. You know, I want to see how he markets,
Yeah.
right? That's the truest test. Now, it's no knock on you or your intelligence or your introspection or anything like that, but I feel like um, the, the human ability to access all the knowledge that's gone into our decision making and then put it on paper for
Yeah.
someone else to see is limited. You
Yep.
know, I tried to do that with my book, and I think I was successful to a certain degree. But I'm like, there's so much stuff I will forget to mention, or I simply don't have subconscious access to,
Yeah.
that is necessary maybe to communicate this to
It's a
someone
good point.
else.
It's a
So,
good point.
so I don't really care what John says about how to market because he's marketing right now. So
It's so obvious when you say it, isn't it?
I'm just going to watch how he markets. So how
I'm
am
just
I
going to
going to
let
do that?
myself be marketed to.
That's right.
Is
So how am I
basically
going to
what you're
do
saying.
that? I'm going to
Yeah.
sign up for every list he has. I'm going to buy every product he promotes.
Yep.
I want to see, and but not just passively. As I'm reading the sales letter, as I'm looking at the email campaign, I'm taking notes. Now, I mean, I have this, like, for those who are watching, I always have a notebook next to me.
Yeah.
Um, one, because I forget too much stuff, and two, because I want to break down the processes of what I'm experiencing in the world. And so that's it. I'm taking notes. I noticed how he did this, and then he did this, and then he did this. That's really brilliant. He might not remember to tell people to do that when he
Yeah.
teaches them how to market, but I just figured it out by watching him market. Right?
Or there are certain things where they just don't apply to the larger audience. Like
Mm-hmm.
you were running a bigger business than I was at that time, but you were already running a multi-million-dollar business.
Mm-hmm.
I would be kind of stupid to try to sell marketing materials to the tiny subsection of my audience
Mm-hmm.
that was already running a multi-million-dollar business. The
Mm-hmm.
types of things that you needed were not the types of things that people who were earlier on in their journey needed.
Yeah,
And
totally.
so the things that made it into my materials, that still largely make it into my materials, are things that are more for, call it the 101 level. I think about this because we both went to the same university.
Mm-hmm.
So I think about this my time at Western University
Mm-hmm.
in Canada and London. And, my first year 101 physiology class had 1,500 people in it.
Mm-hmm.
My fourth year 404 level advanced muscle physiology class had 15 people in it.
Right.
If you have to sell a product, who are you going to choose to sell that product to?
Right.
And so the way that I've structured my business now is I have super high end mentorship to the
Yeah.
404 people. And then I built software. And I tell the people who are in my mentorship not to buy my software, not to use my software,
Mm-hmm.
because I would be silly building software for the top 1% of the top 1% of the
Mm-hmm.
top 1% of our industry.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's not for them,
Yeah.
right?
So your
And
argument
so
is essentially at my level of growth and development at that point in business experience, no one's making a product for me.
nobody's making a product on the nuances of it. Like, what's the example you and I always give? It was funny over the years because our launches like often started to mimic each other because we saw
Mm-hmm.
how there are certain, like, when you launch products, especially like information products on a big scale,
Mm-hmm.
there are certain problems you run into.
Yeah.
And you only really understand these things if you're like, have waiting lists of tens of thousands of people and
Yeah.
you're planning on doing multi-million dollars a launch.
Mm-hmm.
And like, there's a lot of moving parts in a very concentrated period of time. And so nobody's building a product about the nuances of this thing. Like,
Yeah.
what do you do when you close cart and then you want to reopen cart 2 days later for a short period of time to a very specific subsection of interested,
Right.
not yet bought people? Like,
Yeah.
how do you navigate that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Right?
And yeah,
You
and
can't teach that. Like,
yeah. And I face this problem, parallel problem in hiring quite often, right? Because the people who are great at this are out selling products. It's way more lucrative to
yeah,
go out and sell products than to make products about how they sell products. You know what I mean? And maybe when they retire and they're winding down and they're like, oh, I'll talk about, kind of like you're recounting, the battle days of the past, and then you
yeah.
maybe want to sell a product there, or you sell your business and you're not frugal with your money and you need to
Well,
get some
maybe
money again,
it's
but
a legacy. It's a legacy play for a lot of
yeah.
people, for sure.
But the point is, most people aren't going to sell the product because,
Yeah,
and I say this was a hiring problem because there are many times where I wanted some of the world's best marketers to be working on our team.
Yeah.
And when I go and talk to them, they're like, hey, wait, if I'm that, they wouldn't say this overtly, um, but it would be like, if I'm that good of a marketer, then I'm out marketing things not working for you. You know what I
Right.
mean? So
Right.
that's why I would choose the great people and just see what they're doing rather than ask them what they were doing and try and glean some insights that way. So, and here's the thing. I mean, it wasn't any more expensive than any of the other education that I've done,
Yeah.
right? To follow someone and all their newsletter, it only cost you time, and then to buy everything that they sell, right? It may only be a couple hundred or a couple $1,000 a year,
Yeah.
um, which is what an education costs anyway.
Right.
So it was just a different style of education with a different requirement. There's no passive consumption in that model. It's super active, right? I'm
Right.
going to buy this thing. Okay, so I want to see, once I buy, how do they turn me from a prospect to a raving fan customer? What's
Right.
that journey look like? Okay, cool. Now I'm going to look at how they deliver the product. Like you say, these little problems that you have to solve every step of the way.
Right.
Okay, they delivered the product now. Great. How are they going to deliver the next lesson or lecture or whatever? Okay, cool. How are they going to make sure that when I get to the hard part of the
Yeah.
product or lesson or lecture, I get through it and come out the other side successful, right? So you just watch, after 5 or 6 years, you follow 5 or 6 masters and you're like, okay, cool. I don't know if there's a better education than this.
Yeah. And I think the key to this and why I love this so much is how much focus there is involved in it. And like you can't call it do too many people at one time.
Mm-hmm.
Like what, one, two, maybe three, depending on how much time you have.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be very selective
Yep.
with who you choose. And when you choose that person, you kind of can't really listen to other people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can listen, you can get inspiration from them, but you shouldn't take that many lessons. But that one person you choose, like you become their biggest fan. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
in every sense of the word, and study and okay, oh, like why did they use this? Did I like that? How reflect on your feelings when you
Mm-hmm.
do that? Like I love to do. A lot of people talk about customer experience mapping. I love to do customer emotion experience mapping. Like
Right.
how are people feeling at every stage of the journey? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited. Oh, they're going to be anxious right around here. They're going to feel like maybe they made a mistake. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, they're going to actually feel kind of like internal failure here
Mm-hmm.
because now they're getting into the hard part or whatever, right? Oh, they're going to be unsure. There's shipping. Like,
Yep.
shipping's inevitable. They're going to be unsure. Did I get scammed?
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a little bit of that. How do people manage these types of things? I mean, I thought that was so brilliant when you told me about that.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, you can make a mistake about who to follow. You might uh, see someone and they have a great pitch to get you thinking they're successful, and then you follow them and you see like all these little things haven't been thought of, and then you can jump ship pretty quickly, which has
Right.
happened. I'm like, this person is really, really good at like before the sale, like the experience before the sale,
Huh.
and then once the
Interesting.
sale happens, they suck. The customer experience,
Interesting.
all of it sucks. All right, cool. So do I feel scammed that I followed him? No. I'm just like, oh, that person's really like, look at this. They don't put the level of attention and care that I would into the whole journey. Um, but they got me to follow along to this point. Okay, what can I learn from that in terms of what they were really good
Right.
at? And then what can I fix in terms of what they were really bad at, And how did I feel being tricked, right? I'm not even doing this to have the hopeful future that they promise, right? And I felt
Right.
tricked, right? Imagine an actual customer, how they would feel. It's way worse than how I would feel, right? So you're like, okay, now brand that feeling on your soul so you can fix it when it's your turn to service a customer.
And understand that businesses start by getting customers, but they only succeed by keeping them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so my guess, not knowing at all who these people are, my guess is they're not around anymore doing what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very difficult, no matter how good you are at lead generation, to exist for any sustained period of time, because it just becomes exhausting
Mm-hmm.
when you're churning so much like that.
Yeah, and I think there's a desire for novelty in what we'll call it the marketplace as well. There's all these factors that converge into making it really hard for a company or a business, or especially an individual who's branded around themselves, to stand the test of time. I mean, we
Yeah.
mentioned Charles earlier, and he was always my first example of this. He's someone I liked. He's someone who early in my career was very, very nice to me. I know not everyone had that experience, but he was always really, really positive to me and encouraging.
Same. I had the same
And
experience.
but he had to reinvent himself every few years,
Yeah.
and that was like my first real lesson in why some businesses, brands, individuals don't have longevity. It was because people start to think of you as the person who X, right?
Right.
And then after a while, they're like, yeah, I've been following that person for X for a really long time. Now there's bigger, stronger,
Sure.
faster people who offer X, you know? And so then he would reinvent himself as a person who does Y. And he was brilliant at that. I think he did 4 reinventions in the time that I knew him.
Yeah.
Um, but, actually, someone brought this up to me the other day with the point you're making, which is like companies that have in health and fitness that have been doing something, that have been servicing the industry for 10, 15, 20 years, that still have a product that still exists after that
How
long.
many? How many are there?
Yeah, it's so super rare.
8.
And they were like, they were commenting on, precision nutrition and what we built, and it felt good to be part of that comparison or whatever. But the bigger lesson was just, wow, this doesn't this doesn't
Yeah.
happen very often, you know? And then you think of the big good to great companies from Jim Collins's book, that have been doing it for 100 years. And
Sure.
you're like, man, what a bar. Now, you might not like these companies. They may have human rights problems or all these other things. But the one thing you have to, I don't know, at least consider is how on earth have they reinvented themselves so many times to be relevant for over 100 years? I
Right.
mean, that is impressive on that specific metric.
It is. It is. And so I think about that a fair bit. I haven't been around this game quite as long as you have, but I've been around for long enough. I started my
Mm-hmm.
website in 2011. I've seen a lot of people come and go.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people. And when I think about why, it it's come to two. I've There's two pieces to it that I've seen. I'd be curious
Mm-hmm.
whether you have seen any more.
Mm-hmm.
The first is that there are people who just always would jump on every trend. Call them
Mm-hmm.
like the biz op chasers. Like
Yeah.
whatever business opportunity is in vogue, they're chasing after it.
Yeah.
And they do a couple cycles of those. And that's the same for people who chase algorithmic spikes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, Facebook Lives are hot. So I'm going full bore into Facebook Lives. Now
Yeah.
I'm going full bore into TikTok. Now I'm going full bore into Periscope, into Chat GPT, into
Mm-hmm.
whatever is like in vogue.
Yeah.
They basically make that the center of their entire platform to be able to jump on this spike, on this business opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And I group them in at the same time because they're often the same kind of people. I have found that people seem to only really be able to do 2 or 3 rounds of that.
Yeah.
I think some combination of they get exhausted versus their audience just says, like, come
Mm-hmm.
on, dude, you can't possibly be an expert on this thing this week. Like,
Yeah.
I don't buy it. I think the second is they just they they seem to get pulled in so many different directions
Mm-hmm.
that it's very hard to consistently do the same thing good enough for a long period of time. I mean, I think about
Yeah.
going to the gym. You go to the gym, you have the best workout in your life, and then you eat perfectly that day, you wake up the next morning, nothing changes.
Mm-hmm.
Next day, you go to the gym, best workout in your life, you eat perfectly that day, you look in the mirror the next day, nothing changes. Well,
Mm-hmm.
it's fucking hard, so you quit.
Mm-hmm.
The better course of action, of course, as you know, is hit 80%, hit 70%. do a
Mm-hmm.
really good job consistently for long enough for those efforts to build up and don't get distracted.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's really hard to do in this business world today.
Mm-hmm.
Really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the layer that makes it especially challenging is that a lot of people aren't sure if they'll ever be good enough at it because there's a threshold that you have to reach. I mean, you don't have to be there in the beginning. I certainly wasn't.
No,
I've seen your original websites and the Wayback Machine as well. You
my
certainly weren't.
Instagram is it's Coach Goodman. That's how late I got to. That's not even good grammar. There's no sky comma. You can't do a sky comma. That's how late I was
Yep.
to Instagram.
So, I mean, I coach a lot of youth sports now, and the
Yeah.
same is true, right? Like with coaching kids, there has to be some kind of feedback that you're getting better. And even more than that, that there's a trajectory to crossing the threshold of good enough. You know what I mean? And some people don't have it. I mean, I've met some people who have been at it for a really long time and they're doing their 80% and they're chipping away and they've improved. But I can see they will never cross the threshold where
Hmm.
anyone will care. You know what I
So
mean?
why is that for one person and not for another person who might be able to break through?
I
What
mean,
makes you say that about one person where you can look at them and say, I kind of just don't think you have it in this way.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's an accident of birth. It's DNA. It's who your parents were. It's, I don't know, the way your lips form words when you talk in front of the
Yeah.
camera. It's your ability to understand the nuance of language. I don't know what it is, and it's different for each like subdomain of expertise. But let's say it's someone who really wants to be a great communicator in the written form, right? They want to create written content and write
Okay.
books and write web pages and whatever. Um, and you watch them and they're improving, and you're like, yeah, but this person just, they don't think deeply enough, right?
Huh.
So a good, this person can learn the craft of language really well and they can turn beautiful phrases, but they don't think deeply enough. So nothing that they write is interesting,
Right.
you know, or they don't have their finger on the pulse of what other people find interesting, so they may think deeply and they may be improving in their craft of actual writing, like writing sentences that sound good and fit together nicely with the next sentences, but they don't know what's interesting to other people, so they will never build an audience that's
Huh.
big enough to fund a lifestyle that they want. And so there's some things like that I can just see over time. Or someone wants to be an entrepreneur, and I'm just like, they don't have the right combination of understanding what people want to buy
Yeah.
and what they are willing to pay for and how to press all those buttons to get them to pay at the right time.
So what
And
do these people? How do these people identify that in themselves then? And
I
what
don't
do they
know that
do?
they ever will, right? Because I think during those early stages, when you're working hard and there's not a linear improvement that is associated with that, it becomes a really difficult mental psychological time. It's where coaches come in handy. I mean, that's why I make the example of youth sports, right? It's where a
Yeah.
coach can come in handy, um, and like I don't know, our oldest two are 13 and 11 and they play soccer, and so right around 13 is when you actually start to be able to play at the next level, right, where
Yeah.
it's like the player development leagues or the regional teams or those kind of things. And everyone is turning that age at the same time, right? They've come up, they've
Right.
played since they were 4 and they played in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And the difference between some of them isn't that big,
Yeah.
especially if they're playing on travel teams and competitively and all that stuff. But you'll just know which ones are going to be able to play at the next level or not. And it's some
They seem to
combination of
just get
size
it.
and speed and
Yeah.
aggressiveness and knowledge of the game. And there's words for this. But as a coach, you're just like, you're probably better here. And you might not
Yeah.
say you'll never be good enough for blank. You just say, here's the development path I think that's right for you, and here's the development path that I think that's right for you. And I think that's where coaches come in handy. And this, and really, I don't know, coach is a word, mentor is a word. It just means someone with experience who can identify patterns better than you can and who can help direct your next efforts. because
Yeah.
I think the idea, like in nutrition and exercise, this idea of doing 80% over the long time is the only possible course of action, really, because even if you never get super fit, you will always improve, and that will help your health, and that will help your
Sure.
quality of life, and that will help with potential longevity markers and things like that.
You may not be shredded on stage, but
Yeah, but
you're going to get all of the really important benefits of it
that's right.
that actually matter at the end of the day anyway.
Yeah, but and I think in business we can take that analogy over to some extent. But it
Yeah.
doesn't work all the way, because at some point you have to get paid enough to live and support your
Yep.
lifestyle and your family and whatever needs you have. And if you never are going to get good enough at whatever element, it's the content creation or the marketing or whatever, selling, um, then I don't know. There's maybe a different path you need to take,
Yeah.
And so I think about the tension that exists between the two, because I'm not saying keep working at it's a mistake, right? But I know people who've kept working at it and have never gotten good enough,
So
and
do
they've
I.
wasted a lot of years messing around in a space that they probably would have never succeeded in, when they could have found a space that they could have done well in.
Right.
Because it doesn't mean you're a failure as a person, that you're never going to be a great, moving, inspiring writer. It just means that maybe you don't have the potential to do that thing specifically. And there's many, many things you can do. So um, it's hard, because in the beginning, you can't possibly know these things. So you just have to work and try and get better. Um, but there comes a point where that objective person, whatever you call them, friend, coach, mentor, whatever,
Yeah.
um, can come in and say, hey, I've seen a lot of people try and make it in this space. Here are the qualities that I think are most
Yeah.
desirable. Um, you're missing one or two of them. I don't know if this is ever going to be the thing for you. And if they're really great at what they do, then they might say, but here's some areas that you might explore with your unique abilities and skills and passions and desires, etc.
Right. I talk about this in the book a bit, and you've given me some new things to think about.
Mm-hmm.
I
What
talk
what
about the idea.
specifically?
Well, so I talk about the idea that you can become okay to good in just about anything with
Mm-hmm.
enough work.
Yeah.
I think that there are only a few things where your natural skills and attributes allow you to go from good to great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what's really important is that you do the requisite experimentation on yourself. And I give a process in the book to do that,
Yeah.
to do a series of rapid experiments, like a
Yeah.
new experiment every 2 weeks, to
Mm-hmm.
find out what your thing is,
Mm-hmm.
where you have the potential of being great at
Yeah.
that thing.
Yeah.
And I
And
and I
there's
give the example of like I think that I could be good at YouTube if
yeah.
I did it for long enough. I think that with that same amount of work, I could be a world class writer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that I'm anywhere close to there yet, but I think that I could get there. And it doesn't mean that I can't use video, like I can't do stuff like what I'm doing with you now. But how I then think about it is I say, well, other stuff needs to support my thing,
Yeah.
right? So like this summit where we're speaking at, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is supporting my writing. This is
Yes.
supporting my book. But
Yeah.
the book is the number one thing.
Yeah, what's the core of what you're working on? Totally. Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
even had this, it's so funny because you learn this in certain contexts of your life and then you go mess it up in others, or just forget it, like, and this is a dumb example, but just recently, like, I was like, I've been playing around with writing poetry,
Okay.
and then I would like signed up for an art class. I'm like, oh, this will be fun to like do some drawing. Um, and like in my mind, there was this like tension, like which one am I going to focus on and spend my time on and stuff like that. And then I was like, it took me a while to just be like, duh, dummy, your whole career has been writing words.
Yeah.
You're
Right.
really freaking good at this, like
Yeah.
probably world class. Uh, why would you think it's up for grabs as to which one you'd be better at? You know what I
Right.
mean? Like, it's
Draw some
dumb.
do some Alice in Wonderland. Draw some sketches beside your poetry.
That's right.
like
Like,
have fun with that. Right?
yeah, I'm just like, this is so dumb. Why would I forget that and treat these two things? Because they're novels, the answer. And
Right.
I don't have confidence in either of them. But why would you treat these two things as they're like relative equivalence, and that your
Right.
ease of producing, not to say that poetry is going to be easy, but it's so firmly in the wheelhouse of everything I've good at, have spent 100,000 hours on,
Yeah.
and identify my core being with, which is persuasion, capturing thoughts and emotions, capturing information in writing. That's I mean
Yep.
that's what I'm good at, you know?
That's what you do. That's what you built your career off of. That's what
Yeah.
you. I agree with you. That's what you're
So I'm
world
like,
class on.
oh, I wonder if I'd be better at poetry or drawing pictures. Well, what
Yeah.
the hell, dummy? Of course it's going to be the first one, you
And
know?
it doesn't mean that you can't draw pictures, but we have to create that line and that divider, don't we, between
That's
what
right.
is a hobby and what is your thing, right? What is the thing that is going to, I mean, in this case, you don't need it to pay you money, but like, what is your thing to pay you
That's right.
money? What is a hobby? And hobbies are wonderful,
Yep.
but you don't like, my hobby is lifting weights.
Mm-hmm.
My job is not how good I look by lifting weights.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
And
not,
this,
I'm not, I'm not good enough, naturally skilled enough to do that. I'm just like, if you understand the human body, you understand musculature, you understand that like muscles look different on different people. Like
yeah.
some people just grow muscles better and they look better when they grow. Um,
And this, I mean, doesn't this circle us back to like what we started at, and the theme of this whole conversation, really, if we had to theme it now,
let's theme
is
it. Do my
is
work for me. This is great.
yeah. Well, it's this idea of, leaning into your particular individuality, right?
Right.
That's where we
Right.
started, right? What are you doing and what are you not doing? How do you
Right.
choose what you're going to do and what you're not going to do? How do you place a bet on the things that you think you actually could have success at and the things you are much less likely to have success at, right?
Right.
Like we can't know for sure. But when you set up shop to be an entrepreneur, for example, or even choose a career and try and go work for somebody, you're placing a bet on your ability to be successful in this thing. Um, Gosh, I really want to increase the probabilities that that success comes.
Yeah.
And the way to do that is to know something more about yourself, have a really clear, sober impression about what your skills and unique abilities are and those kind of things. Uh, and then go out and lean into being you, right? And utilize those things. And if you ever find yourself tripping into spaces where you don't have any reason to believe that you'll ever have the skill set, um, quickly do that experiment and get out, you know?
Be able to recognize it. I love
Mm-hmm.
that.
Or just get help from friends. I mean, I have written about this extensively in the book. There's literally no time that I've been successful at a thing where I wasn't using my own intuition plus explicit feedback that I've requested from the people around me who know me best.
Right.
You can't do customer research that way. You can't figure out your own unique abilities that way. You can't figure out what your next course of education and action should be without that. I mean, I use it in parenting and coaching, and just who around me has demonstrated competence in this thing. And even if I'm good at that thing, I'm going to go ask them, hey,
Yeah.
can you give me an objective eye? Like, here's what I'm thinking a lot about. Tell me, am I crazy? Am I smart here? Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the wrong thing? Tell me how I can be better at this and tell me where I'm screwing up, you know?
Well, I'll end this with a quick story where you were that person for me. I sent you a text message one day. This is a number of years back, and I said, uh, "Hola, mentor. I need some mentorship. Can I come see you?"
Right.
And so I drove to Hamilton, and we met for lunch. And I told you about this great idea that I had been working on, and you listened very well, and you asked good questions, and you didn't give me your opinion for a while. You kept asking me questions, and you listened. And then, just as we were leaving, we were waiting in our cars, and you said, I think this is a great idea for somebody else. And you're right. It was. I still think it's a good idea, but it's definitely not the right idea for me. John, thank you so much.
Yeah.
This
Thanks.
is always a pleasure.
Thanks for having me,
And
man. You have the distinct honor of being my first podcast, if we want to call it that, conversation in like
yeah,
3 years or something like that. So I
wow.
hope I was adequately not rusty, and it was fun anyway.
You're
Hopefully
always
people
well
get something
spoken,
out of it.
not rusty. I mean, this is what I wanted. to get out of it? Like not just, hey, here's your 3 tips for success. Like how do we really think about these things?
Hmm.
And so I appreciate that. I appreciate you.
Awesome.
And
Cool, man.
we'll
Thanks
talk
for
soon.
having me. I appreciate it.
You got it.